Alright, so here is a follow-up video on the HDR calibration and settings for the Samsung CHG70. This is the latest revision of this monitor. I'm pretty certain that it's to do with the BIOS update, but it may also be a model revision as well. And the FreeSync range is also 48 to 144 Hertz, so it's on FreeSync 2 setting, which is the ultimate setting, which is really improved. And I can show you that menu right here. You just click here and it gives you all these options. I'd leave it on cinema typically, but you can go to anything else up here. Even has a high brightness, which is actually brighter, which is nice. With the screen being so bright though, I typically don't use it. Okay, and with Ultimate Engine, it does disable some of the other settings that might be useful, but if you're in HDR, full HDR10 and using FreeSync 2, you're pretty well set to begin with. So it does take a little while to disappear. This is SDR right here, just standard dynamic range, and if you look at the FPS, it's actually quite high. Everything is maxed out, of course, at 1440. We do get quite a lot of FPS in the sky, particularly. Now I'm going to enable HDR, and you'll notice some changes. Let's see the video. Advanced. Switch this to auto. Make sure this is on HDR10. Then all we need to do is just escape from this point. There we go, just like that. Okay, so what you're going to see is more of a dynamic range, essentially. You can look at the rocks and see that is improved. You can look at the sky and see that it is improved. And there's even a more vivid orange here on the sand. A little bit more, I guess, quality in the rocks and the reflections there. There is one thing to note, though, that is not quite visible here on this particular camera, but the brightness does go down. However, it is still quite playable, and I've only noticed this in this particular game. Again, Assassin's Creed Odyssey does a fantastic job. I know that on the PS4 Pro, the Xbox One X, and things like that, it does a very, very good job of maintaining the full spectrum HDR10 while giving you really good brightness. The screen is supposed to be capable of HDR 600. I personally picked up close to 500 on it on cinema mode. I wouldn't be surprised if it could go over 500 to 550. The typical brightness is 350 on these screens, and like a white background, and mine's around 380 to 390, but that can always vary. But I would typically assume that you wouldn't get below 350, and you could get up to say like 400 to 405. So it's a great screen, and with FreeSync 2 HDR, which is just coming out into some games, you can actually get lower latency and less motion blur and things like that can sometimes be associated with HDR and FreeSync. So it's a pretty solid buy. I'd highly recommend it, especially since the price has gone down and they've fixed out all the little kinks that it used to have. And the FreeSync range might even get better with the later updates. So 48 to 144 Hertz is pretty good and very usable. And another important thing to note is that once it goes below 48 Hertz, so like even if you are pushing it like around in the low 40s or something, it actually has a method to where it sort of doubles the frames as that happens, and it maintains a lot of smoothness. So overall, very impressive monitor. I highly recommend it, and if anyone has any questions or suggestions, feel free to add them. Thank you.